It's time for the movie raid, and tonight's victim is an actor, director, author, amongst many things. And I'm going to let him introduce himself. Go ahead.
Well, hello, I'm Crispin Glover, or Crispin Glover, as I use for my films and books and shows, which is my birth name. And I'm glad to be here talking to you on your show.
Well, you've been in both television and film combined for quite a while, like Simon Says, Back to the Future, amongst many other films.
Absolutely.
And not only that, you also, between film and television, which do you think is more of a challenge of it, in your perspective?
Well, I haven't really done very much television since I was a teenager, and there was actually a lot of interest in me for doing television. I had 3 separate occasions where they wanted to develop television series around me, and I always was very discomforted by television, and it's related to actually things that have to do with my shows that I tour with, because I even at this point in time feel a certain amount of discomfort within the corporately funded and distributed film world. Mm-hmm. It isn't to mean that I don't enjoy working in the corporately funded and distributed film world, because I do, but I feel like my first film that I've been touring with since 2005, I'm on year 7 of touring now, most of the actors in that film have Down syndrome, but the film is not about Down syndrome at all. What it really is my psychological reaction to the corporate constraints that have happened in the last 30 years in corporately funded and distributed film, where anything that can possibly make an audience member uncomfortable is necessarily excised, or that film will not be corporately funded or distributed. And I think it's an extremely damaging thing to the culture, because it's that moment when an audience member looks up at the screen, thinks to themselves, is this right what I'm watching? Is this wrong what I'm watching? Should I be here? Should the filmmaker have done this?
Yeah.
What is it? And that's the title of the first film. What is it that's taboo in the culture? And what does it mean when the taboo has been ubiquitously excised? And I think that's a very damaging thing, because it's when people are asking questions and they're having a real educational experience. And for those kinds of questions to be ubiquitously excised, I think it's really the opposite of education. And what is the opposite of education but propaganda? And I think that really is what's happening in our corporately funded and distributed film world right now, and it's unfortunate. At the same time, like I say, I grew up essentially around the industry. My father's an actor. My mother retired as a dancer and actress when I was born. So it was a kind of a business decision of mine that I made at a young age when I was 13. And I'm at the same time as I have questions about the moral elements that are happening now by not going into taboo and not asking strong questions. I'm still grateful and happy to be working in the industry. So I don't really want people to think I'm this ne'er-do-well who has nothing good to say or think. But I grew up watching a lot of films, or particularly when I was 16, studying acting and going to see a lot of the revival houses that were popular in Los Angeles in 1980. The films that I was seeing were the films really mostly from the 60s and 70s, some from the 1920s and 30s, that tended toward asking questions a lot more and sometimes dealing with taboo subject matter. And this was kind of what I thought the industry I was stepping into was going to be doing. And then I started thinking in the early 80s, as I was really starting to work a lot more in film, where are these questions that I thought that I was going to be a part of? And it's taken me a while to really realize there's a lot of reasons why it's happened, and some of them are socio-political, and there's a lot of different elements. But these films that I've been touring with, both part 1 and part 2 of what will be a trilogy, tend toward asking questions or causing questions to be asked. And this is part of why I tour with the films, because I'm there to have genuine discussion with the audiences. Then after I actually perform a live show that consists of 8 different books. I have 2 feature film. I do the 2 different shows or the 2 different films on subsequent nights, and then I have a Q&A, which lasts for about an hour, and then I have a book signing. There's a number of the books that I've published that are available, and if people have other things they want to ask or sign or whatever, I don't charge for the signings. You kind of asked about that before we started talking, but it's just a thing at the end of the show that I do, and I make sure to stay there until the last person is there. We were also talking about sometimes the distance. This is the way that I've been distributing my films. I call it kind of a vaudeville form of distribution, and what I mean by that isn't like doing funny jokes or a tap dance. What I mean is the kind of distribution that existed really before corporate distribution worked, and live acts played throughout the United States and Canada and all over the world, essentially. And people would tour and have a live interaction with the audience. And I feel that the audience really gets something out of it, especially in year 6 of touring. I've sincerely started to understand what that actually means to have that interaction, and how important that interaction is, and really how that's been missing in essentially the last at least 70 years of our kind of theatrical world, which has become much more encapsulated and separated by cinema being removed from that kind of interaction that people can really have with a live experience. Although cinema is a part of what I'm touring with, the live aspects are not to be underestimated. And like I started to say, sometimes people travel from far away. I would like to be where you are. I've been wanting to come to Missouri for a while. There's a particular venue I've been in contact with, and I'm going to contact them again, called the Ragtag Cinema. And you said it might be a bit far from where you are. But my experiences is I've had people, I'm not saying that people should do this, but I have had people drive for overnight and, many hours at a time, or fly in, and it's really something. I'm quite impressed by sometimes the dedication people have, and again, really ultimately very grateful to all the people that come to the shows, because that's the way that I've been essentially recouping on the investment that I've put into making these films. So I have a very personal relationship with the people that come to my shows, as opposed to the norm, which an actor or director has, which is a kind of a corporate shell that essentially has the onus of recoupment upon that corporate shell. And then an actor or director will do a few days of a junket, but I don't have that corporate shell, and so the people that are really repaying me for my investment are the people that come to my shows, and again, I'm genuinely grateful for it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate you don't really see that type of commitment anymore, especially when they go to the theaters, and I mean the artists themselves go to the theaters. I know there's a lot of them that can't always do that. It's not their fault, because they're making another film, they're doing this film, doing this and this, but it's the unfortunate side, because the artists can't really connect with the fans that watch the film, and you kind of lose that.
What I think is happening is just there's a corporatocracy essentially that is having strong influence on what the messages or non-messages are that are coming through in the film world, and there's a lot of bribery essentially that takes place, and so true thought or true questions are not really happening. And this is why I'm passionate about going around with my shows and films, because I don't really see any other way to get that kind of message out there other than by doing it on my own.
No, I mean, you can't just stick it on TV and expect someone to say, "Oh, okay, I get it." No, you got to be there.
Television would not distribute these movies. Like I say, these films deal with genuine questions, or another word for it, or things that would be considered taboo. Not only would television not corporately well distributed, nor would corporate film distribution companies. I mean, to be fair, there are smaller companies that would have distributed my films, but what that would have meant would they would have released them theatrically in, say, LA, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Seattle, and maybe one or two other cities, and then it would have gone out to DVD. But I was sincerely and am sincerely interested in bringing it out to places that are not normally where these kinds of films are distributed. And I've been all over the world and all over the country, and again, I'm on year 7, and I haven't gone everywhere that I intend to go.
Unfortunately, it's always got to be about money, because a lot of these artists that do something like this are always constantly restrained. They can't get. It's like if a certain scene or a certain ending that they wrote, and it automatically gets cut because either the company that makes the film or shells out the cash for it, they don't agree with it. They'll just cut it out and not allow that artist to show what wants to be shown on the screen.
Well, and essentially what it means, I remember somebody saying to me, OPM, other people's money, is kind of trying to say to me, you shouldn't invest in your own films. And I immediately said back, that's OPI, other people's ideas. If you're going to get something across to people, at this point in time, you must fund it yourself. And at this point in time, you must distribute it yourself. If you're going to distribute or get funded by a corporate entity, you're going to be giving the ideas that are in the interests of those corporate entities. There's this new kind of movement that's come around, which I realize it's not exactly the same thing, but there is something related to what particularly my first film was reacting to. And mind you, the first film I started shooting in 1996, but I was reacting to something that was very specific, and this new movement is this Occupy movement. And I know sometimes there are people that don't like the sound of it, or it can mean a lot of different things. But what I am noticing that Occupy movement is doing that's related to what my first film is protesting, essentially, is this. From what I understand about the Occupy movement is that they are protesting that there has essentially become a legalized form of bribery, wherein business interests, banking interests, are now essentially legally able to bribe government officials into doing their bidding, into doing what's in the best interest for the banking/corporate interests, and not for the people who the political elements are supposed to be there for. What I noticed with my own film, what is it, as I was expanding it from a short film into a feature film, is that really, in a related way, the corporate interests that are funding and distributing feature films are imposing what is in their best interest into what the messages of the films are about. And if there's anything that can really cause questions, that would ultimately cause an educated and thoughtful populace that would question corporations themselves, this is something that's excised or not funded and not distributed in film and television and media in general. And again, I think it's a very damaging thing, and that's essentially what my first film is protesting. The second film I didn't write, and there are related elements and taboo elements in the second film that are related to things about the first, but the second film was written by a man named Stephen C. Stewart, who'd been born with a severe case of cerebral palsy. He was very difficult to understand, and when his mother died when he was in his early 20s, he was put into a nursing home and essentially locked there for about 10 years. He didn't want to be there, and he couldn't get out. The people that were taking care of him there would derisively call him an MR, a mental retard, which isn't a nice thing to say to anybody, but Stephen C. Stewart, was of normal intelligence, and the emotional turmoil that he must have gone through for the decade that he was locked into that nursing home, I I can't even begin to imagine. But when he got out, he wrote this screenplay, and it was written in the style of a 1970s TV murder mystery movie of the week, wherein he's a bad guy. And this was something that was really important to Steve. He was somebody that was he did have a disability, and this film is about a bad guy, a character that's a bad guy that has a disability, but the emphasis here is that he's a person with a disability as opposed to the emphasis on a disability. And a person can have dark thoughts. And it is very important to Steve that people understand that a person with a disability can have dark thoughts, and he does particularly dark things. And this film is really, when the whole trilogy is done, It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine, which is the name of the second film. That will be the best film of the whole trilogy. But not only that, I feel like it will probably be the best film I'll have anything to do with in my entire career. And it really essentially has to do with a kind of an emotional catharsis that happens with the Stephen C. Stewart character. But I don't mean to dismiss What Is It, because I'm very proud of that film for different reasons. It's just that this emotional catharsis I put on a very high level. But these films and live shows that I perform, which are from old books that I've taken from the 1800s and reworked and turned into different books, which are heavily illustrated. And these images of the books are projected behind me, and then I perform a 1-hour dramatic narration of these 8 different books. And I've been doing this quite a lot in the last 6 years, and it's become a very important thing for me to do. It's hard to describe as to exactly how important I've realized it is for me to continue to do this. It certainly doesn't have the same kind of corporate reach that when I'm acting in a corporately funded and distributed film does, but I can tell that in the long run these things are probably far more important in certain ways than the corporate work that I've done.
Mm-hmm. Would you also take this method towards music as well? Because you're also into recording music as well.
Well, I recorded an album way back in 1988, and that was corporately released. Ultimately, it was recorded and produced by Barnes and Barnes, which I enjoyed making the record, and there was a concept behind it, and I'm proud of the record. Actually, strangely, I publish my own books, and I first started publishing. The first book I published was back in 1988, called Rat Catching, and I published had the record album come through a corporation called Restless Records in 1989. At the time that I had sold approximately the same amount of books, which I'd self-published, as I had with the record, I bought in a lot more money from my books because I published it myself. At this point in time, I've sold far more books than records, and it was an early lesson to me about self-producing my own work, and that it was an important thing to continue to do. Now, I mean, I've made most of my living by far corporately as an actor, and there is certainly something compelling about the way corporations are able to gather together for a certain idea and bring something out in mass. A corporation does not have to be a bad thing. It just means a group of people getting together to bring something out. Unfortunately, what I think often is happening now with corporate interests is that it's ending up having negative impact on that which is expressed in art. It can be very good for finances, or it can be very bad for finances. It just depends on how it weighs. With my own personal books and my own personal films, I'm finding that for me right now, it's better to be doing it with my own financing and going out to people and having the direct relationships with the people. It doesn't mean I would always go that route. I believe it's possible at some point in time my own interests may align with corporate interests. There are times when corporate filmmaking did go into questioning and fossil films, like someone like Stanley Kubrick, who's one of the most thoughtful, intelligent, questioning cinematic filmmakers that there's ever been. And not only was he working in the corporate film system, but he was working in the studio corporate film system, the most corporate of all. And these films are incredible. So there's a waxing and waning of times when films can, or when corporations have more influence and less influence on what the creative questioning that's going on in films. And right now, I feel like I'm specifically saying in the last 30 years, there seems to be more of a waxing in the control that's happened within corporate filmmaking, and I feel like less questioning is happening right now. It doesn't mean it will always be like that, but I feel like right now it's pretty much like that. But, you know, I've worked in the corporate film world for many years now, more than 30 years, and I'm glad to have been a part of it, and I expect to have good experiences in the future with it. But I also feel like it's important to be vocal and questioning about these kind of controls that are currently happening, hopefully to have positive influence on the kind of questioning that can happen in corporately funded and distributed film.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the tour again, real quick, because you're about to hit the road, tomorrow or something?
Yeah, tomorrow. I'm in Los Angeles right now. I'll fly to Atlanta tomorrow. I have two shows at the Plaza Theater, which I've been to before, in Atlanta. And then I fly the next day after that, which I believe is on Friday, to Pittsburgh. And I'll have a show in Pittsburgh on Friday and Saturday at the Andy Warhol Museum. Then I'll be back in Los Angeles for 4 days. Then I fly back out to Florida. I'll be in Jacksonville, Florida at the Sunray Theater. I may have one more additional venue, but I think about to book that. That's going to be in between a Florida show, or rather a Jacksonville show and an Orlando show. I'm going to have two shows in Orlando, Florida. I think it's on the one show in Jacksonville on the 22nd at the Enzian Theater. But I have more shows coming up after that. I'm going to have a show in Illinois at the Art Theater, which I haven't put up yet on CrispinGlover.com. This is really the best place for people to find out where my shows are by signing up on the newsletter. That will email them with where I'm going to be with what films. They can also just look, but if people really want to find out, because it can sometimes be, of course, years before I come to some place, they'll get a lot of emails. If they don't want to get so many emails, there's also an official Crispin Glover Facebook page, and there's a Crispin Glover Twitter, which also gives this information. I believe I may have a Toronto show coming up, and I may have a show in Copenhagen coming up. But that would be getting into the spring. I'm just kind of finishing up the winter tours now. I've really been touring quite a lot this last year, and, well, frankly, for the past 7 years, or 6 years at least. So, and then I try to organically work it in with acting in other people's films. But it's been increasing, actually, how much touring I've been doing.
Yeah. Are you going to be doing some more directing in other films or like other genres, or are you pretty much sticking to this for the moment?
Well, I acted in a film last year that was based on an Elmore Leonard novel called Freaky Deaky, and I'm assuming that's what they call an independent film, which, those can take sometimes more than a year to actually come out. We shot that last summer, but that could come out within about a year's time. And then I've been developing a screenplay for myself and my father to act in together, he and I have he's an actor, but he and I have never acted in a film together before. And this is what I've started building sets for our own property in the Czech Republic, where I've taken an old horse stables and made it into a place to build sets. And I'll be continuing to make films out there. It's an old chateau that was built in the 1600s, and next to it, that's which I purchased as well, and that's where I'll be continuing to make more of my own films. And they'll probably, as far as the genres go, they'll go into various genres. I'm not going to step back into the trilogy for a while. I won't make part 3 of the trilogy for a number of years. I want to step away from the trilogy and start making some other films that are exploring different kind of elements right now.
Okay. I'll run out of time. How would you tell those are wanting to break into acting? I mean, it is 2012, and how would you tell these kids exactly how to do it in acting?
Well, there's so many things to do. You know, I was lucky in the fact that I had grown up in Los Angeles with parents that had come from an acting background, and it was something I decided to do at about specifically at age 13. I told my parents I wanted to get an agent. I had thought about it. I'd been thinking about it for a number of years before that. They had never pushed me into it, which is a good thing, because I think usually when children are pushed into acting, it can be very damaging. But once I told them that I was interested, they were supportive and helpful, which was also a good thing. In terms of corporate film work in the United States, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, it is pretty important to be in Los Angeles. You know, there's second to that, of course, is New York, but even that's a pretty distant second. Now, there are other ways people have gotten into acting by producing and making their own films. And, of course, with the kind of digital elements that are going on, which has, film versus digital is a whole other conversation, but there are very positive aspects about what can go on with a far less expensive mode of movie making, and if somebody's genuinely talented in the acting world, in the filmmaking world, they can really do a lot on their own and get it out in a lot of different ways now, and get attention in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So those are interesting aspects that I think will probably come into play. But, again, I was talking about kind of corporate control, and it's something to contend with and something to be wary of. But my feeling is that there seem like there are plausibilities of people coming in with their own interests. I mean, it's got to be good, though. It's like they've really got to come up with stuff that is, true and organic and beautiful and thoughtful and has humor and drama and everything, And if somebody has that talent, there's no reason that they can't persevere. But it's still a struggle, no question, and there is competition, and there is a lot to deal with. It's not an easy ticket. It's if somebody's going to decide to do acting or filmmaking, they kind of have to really put everything in it. Everything. There's no room for second guessing. It's like all or nothing. It's the only way to persevere, essentially, is to just know that is the only thing you will do, and you will make it work no matter what. And it can't be about money, and it can't be about fame. It has to be about really doing a good job because it's what you want to do. And even then, there's no guarantees. So it's like I don't like to be an ultimate pessimist, and I don't like to be an ultimate optimist. I like to be a realist about it. But I do say, if somebody has something that's genuine to give, that is a true entertainment value and a true something that can get into people's psyches and thought processes, then they can and should, and if they feel they must, they must.
Yeah.
There's that Joseph Campbell quote that I really believe is right of follow your bliss. And that, of course, doesn't just have to do with acting or filmmaking. It has to do with whatever it is one is really genuinely passionate about in their life. One must do that. I believe in that totally.
Yeah. And there you go. That's Crispin Glover, actor, author, director, and much, much more.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, anytime, man. You're definitely coming back, man. Maybe like what? 2 months after the tour and so forth.
Yeah, well, I'll be touring for a long time. So, if you want to do another a follow-up one in a number of months, in 6 months or something, just email me, and maybe I'll be down in Ragtag Cinema by then, or you'll know of a good. If you know a good venue. That's something I'd like people also to know. If there are people that want me to come out to their area, I think people often think I'm this kind of like mastermind saying, I'm going to go to, Belmont, wherever. It's not how it works. It very much has to do with which cinemas are available and interested in having me come. And I've had multiple shows happen because people go to their local independent theater and say, I know Crispin Glover does these shows, and he says that he'll come out here if you can email him. It's very important that they email me, because often these entities will, if I contact them, they'll try to get me to rent their theater at very high rates. Whereas if they contact me, it means they'll be willing to do a split, which is how I conduct the box office operations for my shows, and it makes it feasible for me to be able to do it financially. So if somebody is listening out there that thinks he'll never come to my area, I will. If you know a venue and you can get that venue to contact me at booking@crispinglover.com. I'm fair with my negotiations, and I'm very motivated to come out to all different places. I'm not, somebody that will only go to big cities or what have you. I want to go all over the U.S. and, well, all over the world. So if anybody has that place they want me to come, get them to contact me at booking@crispinglover.com, and also have them sign up at crispinglover.com for the newsletter. So it'd be great to come out there and see you out at a show where you live.
Oh, and not only that, get his ass over to a college as well.
Yeah, colleges are terrific places as well. I've had a lot of great college shows, and a lot of times colleges have fantastic 35 millimeter cinema capabilities. This is something also people don't really know, but my film prints are 35 millimeter prints. So it's true that I can't really go to just like a club. I do need to go to a cinema, a 35 millimeter cinema where they show movies. But often colleges, universities have fantastic venues that are the perfect places for me to go. And if you can get somebody at your college or university that, or you can help to organize a college university show, I'm very much into doing that, and I've had great experiences in those venues as well.
Yeah, there you go.